Today on Newsgirls, Trump's latest and shadiest ventures.
This was kept pretty secret, and accounts of people who attended have been coming out.
This was particularly rich. The president and his family have made $390 million.
We haven't really seen him take a hard stance on Putin until this point. Hollywood's intimacy coordinators.
There is this power imbalance when it comes to actors and directors.
Emma Stone credits you for helping her get through the long, exhausting Poor Things shoots.
So you'll just see they have sex or they fuck, okay? Great.
And not awful news.
Chemists in Canada have invented a stir stick that you can actually put in your drink to find out if it's been spiked.
There's now an antidote that neutralizes the venom of 19 of the world's deadliest snakes. Welcome to Newsgirls. I'm Wren.
And I'm Mabel. Let's get into the stories.
Well, we say this every week, but this week has seriously been crazy in the political world. So we are lucky to have an expert here to help us break it all down.
So today we're having journalist Tara Palmeri on the show, which is really exciting for us because in our Newsgirls origin segment, we talked about wanting to make a show that's credible and covers all the politics, but is also easy to digest. And it's exciting to see other veteran journalists in the field doing the same.
Yeah, so Tara has a crazy impressive career. She's worked at basically, it seems like every major outlet, ABC, CNN, Politico, New York Post, Puck, and more. But she recently left traditional media to start her own channels on YouTube, which is called The Tara Palmeri Show, and Substack, which her column is called The Red Letter.
And Tara is known for her inside sources in DC, so we are thrilled to get the scoop on the infighting on the big beautiful bill, Trump's crypto dinner, and DC's hottest new political club. She also unpacks the tensions between Trump and world leaders like Putin and Netanyahu.
So starting with the budget, Trump's big beautiful bill has passed through the House, and we know that it's now in the Senate. There's a lot of Republican kind of infighting about this bill. Can you break down the most controversial parts of the bill? What are people fighting over?
Yeah, I think the main parts of the bill that people are fighting over is the fact that it is so expensive, and the CBO score, that's the Congressional Budget Office, they've shown that this is going to increase the deficit in a way that is the opposite of what these, spending hawks, these fiscal conservatives claim to really care about. Also, obviously, concerns about cuts to Medicare and Medicaid and what that would do to some of the members in states where a lot of their constituents rely on that. There's a constant fight going on between, obviously the members that come from really poor states. There are the members who come from the wealthier states who realize that they're not going to be elected again because they come from blue states and they live in, battleground swing districts. And then you have the members who are just like the House Freedom Caucus, the guys who are old school Republicans who care about the debt. Republicans used to kind of mock Democrats for being big spenders. But if there's anything we saw from President Trump, he loves to spend. He loves to put his name on a check. Elon Musk said he was going to go after entitlements with Doge. Trump was like, no, don't do that. My people who are the white working class who need them. It's going to be in the Senate also. They're less controlled by the political tides because, as we know, they're elected every 6 years. So they're not as influenced by running for re-election every 2 years. So you might have some hardliners like Ron Johnson and Rand Paul saying this is not acceptable. They've already sort of said those things so far, and they're real fiscal hawks. And I think it's going to go through the meat grinder again. We'll see if they pull it off. I think they will ultimately because Trump has a lot of power right now, and I think he'll bully everyone into it. But what will the longer term repercussions be, and how will that fare in the midterms?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's always interesting when the same party, members of the same party are fighting. We saw Mike Johnson this weekend on all the Sunday shows giving off an aura of confidence that he's going to pull this off, but also he seemed to be trying to pressure senators not to make such big changes. Do you think this will be a long-term struggle, or do you think there will be any mentality of fall in line and let's just get it passed as quickly as possible?
I think he's going to have to keep saying those things to remind the Senate that he doesn't have a lot of wiggle room. And it's kind of remarkable that he was even able to pass through the House through his own, self-imposed Memorial Day deadline. And at one point, the Senate wanted 2 bills to break it up. The House, they said, we're never going to be able to do this twice. So he's just trying to lay down the hammer of political realities from his chamber.
We want to ask you about this crypto investor dinner that Trump recently hosted. And this was kept pretty secret. Nothing official has been released, but details and accounts of people who attended have been coming out. So what do we know about the event and who was there?
Yeah, we know that it was a lot of foreigners and that they thought that they were there to have influence on the president because in their countries, for example, I think the New York Times quoted a man from South Korea who was very clearly there saying, like, I see this as a donation to President Trump, like a direct donation. American politicians are not allowed to accept donations from any foreigners. Some of them were disappointed, though, that they didn't get as much time with the president, that he came in and, said hello to a few of them and then left. I thought that this was particularly rich because this is a product that the president and his family have made $390 million from. Like they said, it's 40% of his net worth, like more money than he's
Whoa,
probably made as a
That's
real estate
crazy.
tycoon, and then made that in 5 months. Although apparently everyone was really disappointed with the food. I read that food sucked. They
food
said it was
sucks.
the worst food
That's a
ever
bummer.
at a yeah, at a Trump resort. So boo-hoo.
Well, we did see that there are calls now for Trump to release the guest list, but obviously, like crypto donations is like they're anonymous, so it's been problematic that we don't know like who exactly is buying like this
Hmm.
access to the president. Like, do you think that they will ultimately release this guest list?
It has to be like FOIA. Like you should be able to like put in a request, although it's unclear. I mean, will it go into the archives? I'm pretty sure that everything the president does has to go into the National Archives, but as we know, they're not really great at that. And I think that Marco Rubio is actually running the archives in addition to being the national security
That's a
advisor,
lot to take
being
on.
this, yeah, the Secretary of State. He's like the general administrator of something else. He's got a lot of jobs. So
Yeah.
I think this one probably will fall to the wayside.
Don Jr., so Trump's son, just opened an
Mm,
exclusive members only club, which I actually think has such a good name, Executive Branch. They're just really leaning right into it. Um,
right.
but
Pay
in
for
this
play.
Yeah.
but they're keeping it super under wraps, obviously adds to the exclusivity of it all. So
Mm.
have we learned anything? Like what do we know anything about this place?
Yeah, I mean, we know that Donald Trump Jr. is a partial owner with Steve Witkoff's son. Steve Witkoff is like Trump's bestie, official envoy to Ukraine and Middle
Everywhere.
East.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's basically the shadow Secretary of State. He helped broker the Qatar plane, and he was bailed out by the country of Qatar. His Park Lane hotel in Manhattan, he needed money from Qatar, and they gave him $100 million for that. That was back in 2021.
Whoa.
So
Oh,
pretty recently, yeah, he's got some relationships there. Like I'm sure they're going to be taking money from only Americans, and it'll be the $500,000 fee, which is totally reasonable. Trump was certainly able to increase his fees to Mar-a-Lago to 1 million, but at least you know that you're going to see the president.
right.
President's son depends
Yeah.
on how close you think he is with his father.
No media is allowed, but we have to ask, are you going to try to get like an
Of course,
exclusive and
yeah,
get in there?
yeah. Wear my wig.
We saw that Trump over the weekend seems to have kind of turned on Putin. Can you kind of catch us up on what he's been saying and why this shift is notable? We haven't really seen him take a hard stance on Putin until this point. So what's going on?
I think that Trump is realizing he's getting played, that the longer the negotiations drag out, the more he's losing. Trump is like, oh, we have a special relationship. This is fine. You're getting played. You're getting played. Until he realizes that he's got to decide, like, are you going to do the sanctions? Are you going to really like equip Ukraine in the way that they can? Every day that Trump is getting played, though, as he says in his own words, people are dying. He said he could solve this war in a day, but it's been 5 months now, and he's getting tired of it. He's tired of what's going on in the Middle East. He's tired of everything around the world. He thought he could fix it with his own might. Turns out no one cares.
Trump has like obviously flip-flopped on his level of involvement in the war. Sometimes he's like brokering peace talks, and sometimes he's just like, I'm not going to do anything until there's like a ceasefire ASAP. So do you think these tensions with Trump and Putin will influence his like next steps on his involvement with Russia and Ukraine?
I think ultimately Trump will always never like Zelensky.
Okay.
And because Zelensky campaigned for Kamala Harris. Like he that was stupid, frankly. Like you don't get involved in American politics when you're in the middle of a
No.
war. And and also going back to the second impeachment. It's a difficult situation, like kind of like how he's been in limbo with Israel. I think he thought Netanyahu would go along with what he wanted him to do, and he hasn't really. And so, I mean, this ground incursion, is not happy about this. And he's getting tired of the war. I mean, there was a reason he didn't stop in Israel on the way home. And then he has his own problems with the trade war, which he's obviously started. I mean, he only has a few more months left of like true, maybe a year max of having power before he's considered lame duck.
Well, we wanted to ask you about Trump v. Netanyahu because this one really surprised us because they were buddies. They've always been buddies, but obviously things have shifted. Can you break down for our audience a little bit about how we know that there's things are different now?
Yeah, I think Trump just doesn't like someone who makes him look like he's a bad deal maker. I think he doesn't like the images from Gaza, and I don't think he's just not happy with it.
But does this mean if there's tension between Trump and Netanyahu that Trump Gaza won't happen?
Oh, yeah, Trump Gaza, that's funny. Trump hasn't talked about this in so long. Trump just seems to have forgotten this quixotic idea that he had.
So this week we looked into the fastest growing role in Hollywood now, which is surprisingly intimacy coordinators on sets.
Think of all your favorite steamy scenes from recent years, like Bridgerton or Normal People, Euphoria, Red, White, and Royal Blue, even West Side Story. Like, they all used intimacy coordinators.
And basically their role is to be advocates for actors when it comes to nudity and sexual scenes. And surprisingly, they really started cropping up after the Me Too movement in 2017, which is more recent than I would have thought. HBO required them on all their sets in 2019, and Sex Education was actually Netflix's first show crediting an intimacy coordinator.
But first, let's lay some groundwork about what they actually do, because we're sure some people listening are rolling their eyes saying intimacy coordinators sound fluffy and woke, but their actual jobs are quite tangible.
Yeah, so they're involved in a lot of different aspects. Like, they develop really close relationships with the actors, which makes sense. They run around to different departments like makeup and costume to make sure that garments and prosthetics are comfortable. They even work with the camera and sound departments to make sure that everything is best practice.
They help the actors get into character and really find the motivation for why their character is partaking in this physical scene. They come up with exercises to help the actors calm their body afterward. And also, they simply help make these scenes look sexy and realistic.
But of course, their main role is to make actors feel protected, because there is this power imbalance when it comes to actors and directors on these sets, especially when it comes to talking about intimate scenes.
That makes sense. So you know that I dabbled in acting before I found journalism. I never did a sex scene. I don't even think I ever kissed anybody, but I did have to cuddle with a guy one time.
Call the intimacy coordinator. Where were they?
Well, I don't think the college short film that it was for would have the budget for that. But I do understand like how badly as an actor you want to please the director, and it would be so easy. Like, I can even see myself pushing past your boundaries. So a third party that adds like a buffer of neutrality would be really nice.
Well, even now, surprisingly, there aren't that many intimacy coordinators in the industry, although, like we said, they are growing. So there's roughly 100 only certified coordinators working on sets. And there's still a lot of pushback, surprisingly, from actors and actresses in the industry that say having an intimacy coordinator on set can ruin like the spontaneity or authenticity of a scene.
Yeah, and a lot of actors think it's like new agey. So Jennifer Aniston turned it down on the morning show, and she said, they asked us if we wanted an intimacy coordinator. I'm from the olden days, so I was like, what does that mean? They said, where somebody asks if you're okay. I'm like, please, this is awkward enough. We're seasoned. We can figure this one out.
Yeah, and like Gwyneth Paltrow and Timothée Chalamet have a movie coming out, and apparently Gwyneth Paltrow told the intimacy coordinator to step aside during a sex scene. She said, girl, I'm from the era where you get naked, you get in bed, the camera's on. I would feel as an artist very stifled by that.
And I'm sure there are some people that are totally fine without intimacy coordinators, especially the more experienced actors. But then I think about like Mikey Madison, who was just a Nora at 25. And she famously said that she didn't want to work with an intimacy coordinator on that, and they didn't have one. And like, that was one of her first movies.
And there is a difference between saying that you don't want an intimacy coordinator for yourself and then just saying that they shouldn't exist in the industry. So actor Michael Douglas compared them to executives taking control away from filmmakers. So he talks about how it's the job of male actors to kind of guide women in intimacy scenes. So like, you should put your hand here and like, I'll make you feel safe. And that was kind of his point in this article that he was quoted in. Like, okay, Michael, if men weren't all freaks, then we wouldn't need intimacy coordinators.
Yeah, men aren't doing that, Michael. But these are the headwinds that intimacy coordinators have to deal with. So we're speaking to Elle McAlpine, who is one of the most prominent intimacy coordinators in the business. Like we said, she worked on It's a Sin, Brave New World, and the movie Poor Things. And she said in the beginning she really had to sell herself. And even on Poor Things, Emma Stone and director Yorgos Lanthimos were against having her there until she convinced them otherwise.
And it was a good thing because the movie is so sexual and complicated. So Emma Stone is in the body of an adult, but has like the mind of a child. So she's navigating sex through that lens, which is obviously like a lot. So Emma said having Elle there felt like having both a safety net and a choreographer and a handhold. She and I would text after a day of doing some of these scenes and just sort of say how we were feeling and what was going on. And it was just this really beautiful relationship that I found extremely, extremely meaningful.
And something we found super interesting was that Elle discussed the female orgasm with Emma because her character is empowered and is pursuing these sexual experiences for pleasure. Like, it took me as a viewer a while to realize that she's going through puberty, even though she looks like an old, she's not old, but a woman. And that's why she's acting that way.
The female orgasm as this cliche kind of back arching thing that we're all used to seeing because apparently in the script, it'll just say orgasm. And so women just kind of go towards representing it in this one way. Emma feel really liberated and experimenting with how she should act.
I mean, Elle clearly knows what she's doing. Before Poor Things, she worked on the sci-fi series Brave New World, where she helped orchestrate an orgy with 120 people. She says it took 2 days of filming and worked with 3 other intimacy coordinators that were each assigned a group of 30 actors to look after.
Orchestrating an orgy sounds like a lot of work, very interesting job. So without further ado, Elle McAlpine on being an intimacy coordinator, navigating difficult scenes and overpowering directors, and working with Emma Stone.
So Elle, first, we're really interested in, like, what is your process? Let's say you get a new script. Where do you start?
We like to read the script to gauge what the intimate content is and what the story that is, and what story we're being told. So that can range from your most obvious, which is your simulated sex or simulated intimate action, through to familial kind of kissing or touching. It could be between a dad and a son, or a dad and a daughter, or just usually between children and parents. But even if it's a husband and wife giving each other a kind of kiss on the cheek or just a kiss goodbye, we would always flag that, because you never want to assume that actors don't want support for those sorts of scenes. Kissing's an interesting one because it's not simulated. You actually have to do it. We'll usually have a conversation with the producing team. So we have a sort of 3-tier process, which is usually quite unanimous, I think, across most intimacy coordinators. The prep usually tends to be conversations with cast, conversations with producers, conversations with directors, conversations with your makeup team, your costume team, your location team, so that we know where we're kind of shooting these scenes, on the side of a mine or in a cave. Writers tend to shy away from actually exploring on the page what the intimate action is. So you'll just see they have sex, or they have passionate sex, or they make love, or they fuck. And so you're like, okay, great. Now, what kind are we doing? And then once we've had all those meetings with the creative team and the producing teams, we will have our check-ins with the actors. It can either be, full day of meetings or sporadic meetings with cast. Some directors really want you to kind of take the floor and help with the choreography and help with the, with creating the scene. Some directors just want you to stand there and support the actors from like a health and safety perspective. And then we have an aftercare process. So that's usually a check-in 2 days afterwards with the cast. My practice is to provide them with somatic tools to kind of ground them.
Say you're on set and you notice an actor or actress is uncomfortable in a scene. And I know you said it depends like on the movie and on the director, but is it hard to intervene? Like when there's such a clear hierarchy on set?
I think the muscle that is most built in this job is, for me, assertion, and for learning how to do that with the energy of, not with like dominating the space, but an energy of, I am here to protect you all. And if I notice something, please give me the space to just check in. I'll say to actors, if you start to feel uncomfortable, give me like a visual cue. You never want to break their flow or come in and be like, are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? So let's say, I don't know, there was like a waist touch and the actor has moved their hand towards the buttocks or towards the lower back, and that's not consented to. And I sense that, I mean, this has happened before, and I can feel the discomfort of the other actor. I will usually go in and be quite vocal and say, for my sake, could we keep it within the remits of what we've already established, and be very clear and keep the emotion out of it?
Emma Stone credits you for helping her get through the long, exhausting Poor Things shoots. And she has this quote. She says, even when you know none of this is real, there's no real sex happening, you sometimes underestimate what your body is going through separately. And so for those of us who've never simulated anything like this, like what is happening to the body?
Obviously, within sex scenes, you are choreographing it and you're simulating it, so it's not real. But there's always going to be an element of emotion that comes up because your body is going through something. But what I've found and what I've noticed is that there is a slight stoicism and let's get on with it and let's just get through this. And I've consented to it. I'll do it. It's fine. But then afterwards, your body takes a while to catch up. And so I found that, especially if you're doing a show like Poor Things, having constant sex, but with day players, so just random people coming in all the time, it takes its toll. You're immersing yourself in the character. And yet this is such a private thing that you're doing. You have to process it through the body. And that can be really simple things, like literally having a cold shower and just, consciously thinking to yourself, I'm going to wash the day away. Your body has had a stranger on top of you kissing you. That's going to impact you. I think we're crazy to think that it won't.
There has been some pushback, surprisingly to us, from people in the industry who say that, sometimes having intimacy coordinators on set can hinder the creative process or authenticity during a scene. What do you say to that kind of pushback?
I would be more interested in listening to their opinion if they'd worked with an IC before. There were a lot of, and I hate to say it, but older men who just were like, oh, I don't understand. They're old school and traditional and think that they take care of their actresses really well. And it's like, well, okay, of course you do. Like, nobody's saying that you haven't. But what we're saying is that you're also a famous actor. And so there's an inevitable power dynamic there. And by you taking care of them, you don't know if you might have the best intentions at heart. I think like anything, when you're interrupting something, because you are essentially outside of production, so you're hired by production, but you are not part of the producing team, you are external to everything else. So you're a third party. And you can often be scapegoated if something goes wrong.
And I guess that takes us into our last question, which is, what is your prediction for the industry? Like, do you think it will be as synonymous as having a director on set, having an intimacy coordinator on set?
I don't know. I've sensed a shift with the actors more in the last year or so than I have ever before. I just sense more pushback from them, because I think that there's so many ICs coming out that don't have the correct training. And I think also sometimes like the age, I think it's really difficult if you're a 55-year-old man and it's just like, they don't want me telling them how to do it. I think there will always be choice, which I think is different for stunts or directors. When it comes to sex scenes and nudity, I think because of the SAG-AFTRA rules and things like that, you have to have an intimacy coordinator on set for those scenes. But I do think, like Anora, I think you'll get into positions where the creative team are just like, we don't want one. So I don't know. I have hope that there are enough people out there doing a good job and creating change and supporting people.
We've all been overwhelmed recently with immigration and foreign wars and tariffs, but we know there's one thing that's really weighing on all of us the most, and that is Melania Trump's statue was stolen from her hometown in Slovenia. Yeah, even in light of everything that's going on in the world, that theft has just been weighing on our minds. So for full transparency, I texted this story to Mabel as a joke, but she responded so seriously. She was like, I can't believe someone just took it. Well, I can't. It's kind of crazy. So the statue is bronze and 26 feet tall. Like, it used to loom basically all over Slovenia. And I guess someone cut it off at the ankles and just stole it. But weirdly, it has no actual face at all. Like, it doesn't look like Melania.
No, it doesn't look like anyone. But this is tragically the second time this statue was destroyed. In 2020, a wooden version was torched.
So this was honestly just too much to bear. After reading this, we really needed a dose of good news. So I hope you know where we're all going with this. Not Awful News Roundup.
And as of today, we're now partnering with our friends over at the Good News Network. So all of these stories are brought to you by them.
We're really excited for this partnership. So they're actually the largest aggregator of good news in the world, and we're launching a series with them, so make sure to follow and subscribe to get more good news. Chemists in Canada have invented a stir stick that you can actually put in your drink to find out if it's been spiked, which would make like going out and nightlife so much safer.
Yeah, it just looks like a little straw or something, so it's super easy to bring around, and it can detect common spiking drugs like ketamine and GHB, which are odorless and colorless, within 30 seconds.
It's called spikeless, and you basically put like the tip in your drink and it turns pink if it detects drugs, and it works really quickly. It's super easy to use, so I feel like I would take it out if I was going out to a bar.
Yeah, I mean, so would I. I've been out at bars with friends who we think were drugged, but there's no way in the moment to verify. And 1 in 12 college students report being drugged at a party or bar, but the real number is definitely higher since a lot of them go unreported.
And hopefully these sticks can become mass produced soon because they're super cheap to make, like $1 to produce. The maker of Spikeless says that he hopes bars and clubs will just kind of have them on drink stands so that people can use them like normal drink stirs.
In the past, people have tried cups and coasters, straws, even nail polish to detect drugs. So this one I think is the best because it doesn't ruin your drink. The National Institutes of Health is phasing out animal testing in drug development. So Elle Woods finally did it.
While we were writing the story, Wren kept like making this joke, and I didn't get it because I've seen Legally Blonde 2 like once.
Well, you're missing out. It is amazing.
Anyway, I feel like we've been waiting for this development from the National Institute of Health for a while now. So instead of using animals, they're moving towards using things like AI models, human cell lines, and even organoids, which are mini lab-grown organs.
Well, the old school method of testing on mice, beagles, even primates has been getting major backlash, not even just for the ethical questions, but also because up to 95% of drugs that work on animals fail in humans. So what is it all for?
Right, like animals have such different anatomies and lifespans and disease characteristics, so it makes sense that they're not the best option for testing drugs.
And the NIH is launching a new office to oversee this new focus. It's called ORIVA, and it'll be the Innovation Command Center for Human-Based Research. So less animal testing, more science that actually works on humans.
The world is looking a little brighter for people with peanut allergies. So a first of its kind clinical trial has shown that you can microdose peanuts and eventually build up a tolerance to them. So 2/3 of the participants in this trial could consume 5 peanuts at the end of the study without having a reaction.
Well, I am so happy for them. One, because having a peanut allergy seems literally impossible to manage. Like peanuts are in everything, or other food is made in the same facilities where peanuts are. And 2, because they don't have to live without the magic of peanut butter or Reese's anymore.
And looking into the story reminded me of when I was 1. I was like allergic to everything. I was allergic to like eggs and strawberries and cheese and just like literally everything. And my mom would microdose me like those foods basically every single day, even though the doctors told her not to. And so I would just like projectile vomit and like burst out into rashes like every single day for a year until eventually I did build up a tolerance to them. So like, don't try this at home because maybe you'll die or something, but it worked on me, so this makes sense.
Well, thank God she did that. I guess that process is called oral immunotherapy, and it's been very successful in infants, but this recent study is the first time ever there's been a grown-up peanut immunotherapy trial. That's what it was actually called. And now they're testing in bigger trials to see if the immunity stays long-term. Question for all the musicians out there. What if I told you your next guitar could be made from a city sidewalk tree in California?
Yeah, so companies like Taylor Guitars are literally turning urban trees, like the trees that, you know, shade your morning jog, into ready-to-play professional-grade instruments.
That's all thanks to a super cool program by arborists that manage the greenery for over 300 cities. And for every tree they have to take down, they plant 2 more.
So instead of throwing out like perfectly good wood, they have this program called Street Tree Revival where people can track which trees are coming down and then go to the wood and scoop it up to make things.
So instead of rainforest wood like rosewood or ebony, which, you know, are tied to deforestation, this is all local, sustainable, and people say it sounds just as good.
And who knows, the next Taylor Swift song could be played from one of these guitars.
Scientists have mapped the full complexity of the brain in 3D for the first time. Like, look at this diagram. It literally looks like an electric forest, but it's actually the functional wiring system of your brain.
It's so crazy. This detailed diagram came from a sample of tissue the size of a grain of sand. And it took 150 scientists over the course of 7 years to collaborate on what they say is the most complicated neuroscience experiment ever attempted.
So they reconstructed 120,000 brain cells, again, from a grain of sand. and collected so much data about the brain, it's equivalent to 22 years of nonstop high-def video.
And according to these scientists, this opens up so much learning about like the brain's form and function and even diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and autism at an unprecedented scale. Quote, if you have a broken radio and you have the circuit diagram, you'll be in a better position to fix it.
And that makes sense. I just can't get over how cool the inside of our brain looks, and to think that all of those wires are sending messages, that we have thoughts and feelings, and like, it seriously blows my mind, pun intended.
That was a bad one, Wren. So Sotheby's has halted their planned auction of gemstones that were found next to ashes and bone fragments of the Buddha after India got involved, saying that it violated international law.
So we didn't know this, but apparently 1,800 stones that are called the Buddha's gem relics were found in a large sarcophagus-like chamber under one of the Buddha's 8 relic stupas, which are domed burial mounds. And so, if that's confusing, basically when the Buddha was cremated, his relics, which are like bones and ashes, were divided into 8 portions and given to 8 different kingdoms, and each of them built a stupa to enshrine the relics, and these gems were in one of those.
And these specific gems in India were dug up by a British colonial who actually gave a lot of these gems to like museums in India, but then kept a fifth of them. And they've been passed down to his descendants, who are now obviously selling them to Sotheby's. And everyone knows how valuable these are. So Sotheby's on their website said, nothing of comparable importance in early Buddhism has ever appeared at auction. It holds unparalleled religious, archaeological, and historical importance.
So India called on the relics to be withdrawn from the auction because the sale would violate Indian and international law, as well as the United Nations conventions. The next day, the sales webpage was taken down.
And we've seen these stories a lot recently. Actually, one of these stories was like my last 60 Minutes story, where people are just kind of debating the true ownership of art and gems. So we'll see what happens with these gemstones.
And finally, there's now an antidote that neutralizes the venom of 19 of the world's deadliest snakes. So like the black mamba, king cobra, and tiger snakes.
So researchers used the antibodies from a human donor with hyperimmunity to snake venom. And he wasn't born with this, like weirdly. He got the immunity from voluntarily self-inducing himself with snake venom for 18 years.
No, like, why was he doing that?
I don't know.
Where did he get access to the world's deadliest snakes constantly? He says he's undertaken hundreds of bites and self-immunizations with escalating doses from 16 species of very lethal snakes that would normally kill a horse.
It's literally like the peanut story and my mom like microdosing me with strawberries times like a million. Like, we don't really understand what his goal was for 18 years at the point, but we're glad it helped scientists create something called anti-venom. So basically they took this guy's like isolated antibodies and injected them into mice that were infected with poisonous like snake venom and created an anti-venom cocktail that apparently proved very effective.
It's so cool, and they hope it will cover more than 1 million snake bites annually worldwide. Well, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Newsgirls.
Join us next week for an investigation into Palantir.
Bye.